We actually had 2 multi-month union labor strikes, which resulted in our concrete pour sequences changing last minute. With these hang-ups, we needed to kind of have a break glass in case of emergency solution.
So from a cost standpoint, it was imperative that our teams get all these inserts in for our rod drops for the ceiling prior to the pour sequence, or else we'd be fighting utilities.
With those drawings proving to be as chaotic and hard to use as they were, we thought to look to an existing augmented reality QC tool that we already had for a possible solution. It now evolved to, honestly, them being able to install the full system.
Not only does this help from an install quality standpoint, but we're reducing the trade damage with the vapor barrier, right? You're not hack and slash up there trying to give you 4 feet of access for a 3/8 all thread drop.
But he's standing in a fixed position and then communicating with his teammate on what he sees as the final solution.
How did we develop this culture? How were we successful? Because when you bring in your project team members, you have to understand that there's going to be pushback. You have to sit down, you have to discuss all their hesitations, constraints, what's their fears. So that starts with leadership buy-in. What we're talking about is cultivating a mindset that accepts and evaluates change on the fly. It's being flexible. Don't say, I can do this for you. Find out what they're doing on the job. Find out how you can help them. Find out the specific thing that you can make more efficient or a process that you can make more complete. Look forward to working with a lot of you guys on changing the industry and working together. My name's Steve Harpster. This is Jacob Boyd. We both work with BNB Builders. BNB Builders was founded in 2000 by our founders, Brad Bastian, Jeff Nielsen. Brad's still with us today, and now we're a 100% employee-owned company. I'll reference that a little later in the presentation, but I wanted to point that out. Okay, so a little bit about me. I've been in the building trades for about 18 years. Started off as a carpenter apprentice, pushing the broom on the job site. Joined the union with a program called Helmets to Hard Hats. Prior to that, I was in the military, joined right after September 11th. Pretty much was overseas the whole time, and then when I got back, had to get a job. So my mom worked at the apprenticeship center, and that's how I started day one. Started off as a carpenter apprentice, worked my way up through the trades, and like many, I got injured racing motocross. I'm not so good at it, so I broke my leg, and they gave me an opportunity in the office, and here I am. There we go. So, like we mentioned, we were founded in 2000, 100% employee-owned. There should have been a map over there, but that shows the different regions that we work on the West Coast, some of the different market sectors that we work in. The agenda that we're going to talk about, so Jacob's going to do his introduction, and then we're going to talk about a flagship project we had in Redmond, Washington. Our client rhymes with feta, and it was a robust 750,000 square foot ground up project. Jacob's going to kind of discuss some of the project challenges and how we use innovation to tackle them.
Yeah, so we'll kind of on the next slide get into some kind of specific project challenges and kind of set the scene for, I guess, how this workflow came about. It was a new use for an existing QC tool. And a completely new workflow with AR for us. And then I'll kick it back over to Steve, and he's going to kind of let you guys know a little bit about how a job site culture can embrace innovation, specifically kind of from a management perspective, being that he was our self-perform framing team's project manager.
Kind of break down this step by step. I know earlier today in the panel, and I really appreciate that first panel, that was amazing. It's kind of reiterating that, but I actually go through the steps that I took to get that to work on the job site.
And then I'll finish off with kind of in general, where do we see the future of AR going in construction? Our self-performed drywall and ceiling group, we were installing these pipe grid ceilings. So I honestly think of it as something that would be in a film studio or a photography studio. It's, Schedule 40 black steel pipe hung off the ceiling, and it allows, flexible lighting rig locations around the space. This building that we were building, it's a lot of lab space. It's like an R&D type facility. And then so over the course of this long duration project, We actually had two multi-month union labor strikes, which resulted in our concrete pour sequences changing last minute. And I mean, when we're trying to drop inserts for all these systems in there into those slabs pre-pour, it obviously can have a pretty detrimental effect on the outcome there.
Yeah, I'm gonna jump in there. So basically, when you have concrete continuous, there's a good rhyme and reason to it. There's probably a grid pattern. You're going clockwise, counterclockwise in the flow of the project. That was one of the strikes. The Teamsters went on strike, so we didn't have the concrete trucks to get the available concrete to the site. Therefore, you have to prioritize your pour sequence, right? You're chasing IDF rooms, electrical rooms, all that critical path stuff in the project, and that's where it became a little more challenging on like the sequencing, because you plan initial on your job and then you're chasing what that critical path schedule is for your pour sequence. But in the middle of that, if someone's to change that whole flow, that whole direction on the project, you have to reevaluate what that looks like.
Yeah, so I guess with these hang-ups, we kind of determined we needed to kind of have a break glass in case of emergency solution for the if statement. If all our inserts weren't in that slab prior to pours. So to go along with that, we were initially thinking about this traditional layout methods, approach. So we, produced RCPs with all these anchors and inserts, meticulously dimensioned, but I'll show you on the next slide, but it ends up looking like a Jackson Pollock painting or a scatter shot from a shotgun. Good luck, trying to translate those to the ground and then vertically.
I think the other thing from the we'll call it the beam counter side, post-installed anchors are a lot slower, right? You're not just hitting in a blue banger into the slab deck. It's post-installed, so you got to get up. Maybe utilities are in your way. You got to drill in. Then you got to do a post-installed anchor. So from a cost standpoint, it was imperative that our teams get all these inserts in for our rod drops for the ceiling prior to the pour sequence, or else we'd be fighting utilities. And on this particular job, I'd say the overhead insulation, it had a vapor barrier product that the design team was pretty meticulous, wanted it all lined up symmetrically in the different structural bays. So just more levels of complexity on why the importance of us to get this in prior to the pour was crucial.
Exactly. So yeah, just I guess with those drawings kind of proving to be as kind of chaotic and hard to use as they were, so we thought to look to an existing augmented reality QC tool that we already had for a possible solution.
There's a delay when you click the...
Yeah. And then, so then this new AR-based workflow evolved naturally. So just to kind of, I guess, deeper dive into this. So here's our slab, pre-pour. And like I kind of mentioned, the hang-up that happened with the strikes, over the kind of course of that happening and our labor forces leaving the job site, we kind of lost track of what inserts were installed and what weren't, which kind of led to us, the creation of these drawings. But I mean, as you can see here, right, just chaos on a sheet. And then if we go to this next page, so our pipe grid system is in orange here. So not only, do we have the straight vertical all thread hangers, but we've also got seismic cables, given that, we're in Washington State, we're in a seismic zone, right? So for every, handful of points on that RCP, there's actually 4 additional points that come off at angles. And I mean, it's just really to duck and dive and dodge other MEPF elements that were coordinated overhead. So yeah, we look to our XR10 as maybe a solution to help our field guys make sense of their hanger scheme, And as an example here, like you guys have probably all seen these type of videos, but like this is kind of the primary and most popular use, right, for the XR10s is just like overlaying the coordinated model over what's installed, and just validating it after the fact. And so I guess with this, we're like, okay, well, we could definitely identify what's missing from this scope. So this is kind of like the first phase of the process here. So this is a video taken inside the HoloLens. And I guess I can also back up here and say that, initially we thought just give the field guys an iPad, just because we were, thinking about like I forget the guy's name from the chat earlier, but he kind of mentioned like the tripod nickname, right? So wearing like a goofy apparatus on a job site, like it's kind of a tough thing to do sometimes without getting a lot of crap from your teammates. So we thought, okay, maybe the easiest thing to implement at first would be this iPad. But then we overheard our field foreman for that work crew talking about creating like some kind of a unistrut rig to hold the iPad overhead. And we're like, oh man, what do you see this hard hat? Because it's already going to do, for you what you are hoping to achieve. And then so in this next slide here, so this is actually, from that first step and just kind of validating, whether or not anchors were there or installed. Yeah. It now evolved to, like, honestly, them being able to install the full system by means of essentially having a kind of conductor. So we're using Visual Live as a software here, and so we're aware of, like the dimensional drift, like the further you get away from a QR code, right? So the field guys understanding that constraint effectively had this, call him a conductor, but or quarterback, right? Yep. But he's standing in a fixed position and then communicating with his teammate on what he sees as the final solution. And he's using this laser pointer.
Yeah, what they're actually doing in this photo is they're actually hooking up the seismic cables to the pipe grid ceiling. So in the earlier photo where we're doing the bangers, we didn't have the third-party structural engineering with that design build system fully baked, right? So we had the on center spacing of the all thread drop, so that allows you to identify your inserts. What they're doing right now and why it's so important is they're hooking up the seismic cables, but you'll notice the vapor barrier in the deck edge above, it's already installed. So not only does this help from like an install quality standpoint, but we're reducing the trade damage with the vapor barrier, right? You're not hack and slash up there trying to give you 4 feet of access for a 3/8 all thread drop or a 12 gauge seismic wire to be tied back to. So not only does it help me from a financial standpoint and my company succeed on the job, but it also respects our subcontracting partners and reduces trade damage, right? And they respect that and they appreciate that as well. So now I'm going to talk about like how did we develop this culture? How were we successful? Because we've all been a part of those conversations where you go down to the job site, you ask the superintendent, hey, will you buy into this concept? Will you buy into this idea? It yields tons of results. Well, I think the challenge becomes the earlier panel, they discussed it. It takes time, energy, and effort. All those are hot commodities on a job site, right? So how do we see that? Well, what I thought about doing is compartmentalizing the decision-making process, okay? On a job site, you have everybody that's gonna weigh in on a concept. Everyone wants to be an owner on that job site, so you really have to go through the steps of who's your competent person at the time of approval, right? So that starts with leadership buy-in. If leadership's not buying into innovation, if you're not cultivating a culture and an atmosphere where your team will bring these ideas to the table, you're missing half the whole concept. Right? So it starts with leadership buy-in. Leaderships have to be present. You have to be willing to hear the opportunity. Opportunities come in all times of the day. They could come at 8 p.m. and with a little bit of Red Bull cocktail with it, or it could come numerous times throughout the day. So you have to understand that as the leader, you got to outweigh some of those a little bit. Like, is there merit to it? And you're not going to fully verify if the product works. You know, that's really for your teams to figure out for you, right?
Yeah.
What you need to do is you need to foster the culture that allows the opportunity to be received and evaluated.
Real quick, Steve,
Yep.
you know, on that note, just about this culture piece, for us, it's really about like, it's not like a company culture as much as it's a job site specific culture. So we find it extremely important, and it's especially on our larger projects. We're going to have at least one, if not several, BIM, or in our company calls them innovations engineers, but BIM folks, like literally on the job reporting every day, right? Because that's most of the solutions that came up were literally like us hearing people describing some issue they were having like in the field with an existing process. And our ears are burning and we're like, hey, we have a wild ass idea. Would you want to try something out?
Actually, to even make the complexity of the job even a little more challenging, I didn't start the job. I didn't start on the job. I was asked to join the team. I went down, the team was figuring out some things, and it took a few conversations with my innovation team to understand what they were trying to pitch, okay? Once I understood what they were talking about, and I was able to compartmentalize what was being asked of us, I sat down and I brought the project team in. What's really important about when you bring in your project team members, you have to understand is there's going to be pushback. They might not understand what their return on investment is going to yield. Not everyone's going to see that initially, right? You have to sit down, you have to discuss all their hesitations, constraints, what's their fears. Some of it's going to be tangible. Some of it's going to have to be items that you follow up with and you discuss later on the road. But if your team doesn't even feel like their concerns or constraints are heard or listened to, you're not going to get their buy-in. And that is the most crucial step, is the people that are going to enact this process on the job site level, they need to be bought in to the technology, to the innovation. So if you don't allow them the opportunity to discuss what they think is going to be the challenge on it, you're going to kind of lose them right out of the gate. So I think that's imperative. And I had to do that on this job because initially, they brought up, it's raining, we can't do this, design's behind. The reality of it is design's always behind from a project team standpoint. However, you don't need all the design figured out all at once, right? You don't build the whole job all at once. You usually section it off, whether you do it by level, you do it by quad, you do it by elevation. Project teams break it down, and that allows you to kind of follow that sequencing schedule. After you get the project team buy-in, your team's bought in, right? Now, and it's more than just what you're talking about in the moment. What we're talking about is cultivating a cultivating a mindset that accepts and evaluates change on the fly. It's being flexible, right? No different on a job site. Conditions change every day. Rained this Saturday. We can't pour concrete, right? Like there's a lot of factors like that there's give and take. So building a mindset that allows you to just think about things, talk about it, openly discuss it, and evaluate it. That's the part about getting the project team buy-in. Now, the evaluation phase happens. Evaluation phase, I break into two subcategories. There's feasibility, and then there's cost. I don't like to confuse the two, okay? Feasibility means, are you getting something from it? Is it work? Oftentimes, the software designers, the people talking on the robots, they're sales staff. They're going to tell you everything it can do. The reality is this. Sometimes it might not work as intended. And the other part that's really important is even if the whole thing doesn't work as advertised, could you still find ROI on it? That's what we're finding, right? I don't need the thing to work for me entirely. If 80% of it worked, I'd get the ROI needed for it to pencil, right? So we go through the feasibility. That's where your team telling you what their concerns are is really important. That's where you vet out all that, right? So that's the follow-up phase. You have to go through and make sure feasibility actually works. You got to entertain all the things that the team provided during the project team buy-in phase and just vet that to the grave, okay? Some of it might be holdups. It might be a constraint that makes it so you don't even go to the cost evaluation. If it's not feasible, don't even worry about the cost, right? Then we get into the cost evaluation. Feasibility first, and then we go into the cost analysis. The one thing that I've found in my career is when people are doing cost analysis, you miss a few things. It tends to be one, if one person's doing a cost analysis, you're not getting all the perspectives on the job site. Cost analysis, oftentimes what I see is it's like an X versus Y comparison. Example I'll use is autonomous robot layout, right? We got HP SitePrint, one of the vendors out here, Dusty Robotics. There's a few others in the industry, right? Mm-hmm. I've seen the cost comparison. Well, traditional methods, you produce, X amount of footage per day with a guy striking lines on the ground. And, Dusty or HP, they produce Y, right? But do we got to operate a tablet? Do you still have to have an apprentice operate the tablet? Do we have a mechanic following a robot? Like, those are some of the things that you need to evaluate. Is there planning? Is there investment of time on the planning and coordination side of using that technology? So I think doing the cost analysis, you also want to bring in your team because they're going to bring up things that you're not thinking of that are true cost, right? So on the cost analysis, make sure you're doing a thorough cost analysis. And then there's a portion of cost analysis where it's investing on the future, right? So that's not X versus Y. That's going to see a cost up front. You might not see the return on investment immediately. That doesn't mean there's not value. What my recommendation and what I did, when you're investing on something or you're investing in a process that could potentially be innovative and everything on your evaluation phase and feasibility is all checking out, you got to bring in some other leadership. You got to bring in people. That's where the panelists earlier today, they discussed realigning with your company. Don't go rogue. When you're talking about investment, that's a little bit more scary water to tread in than something that already has tangible analysis behind it, right? So when you're talking about investment, bring in other team members and get their buy-in as well. That way you're not on an island and then you're kind of moving in the same direction that the company's vision is. So after you go through leadership buy-in, you get the project team's buy-in, you went through the evaluation fees for both feasibility and cost, and it pencils, now it's about implementation, right? There's not much to beat up here. So one thing on the feasibility part that falls back into implementation is make sure you're demoing this product. Everything works as a sales guy is explaining it to you. Mm-hmm. But make sure you go through a demo. Every single software, or whether it's autonomous robot, AR, any technology should be able to be demoed prior to be full-blown implemented. I mean, some of us work for huge corporations, and we can't stake project success on a dream, right? It has to be tangible. These are the steps that we took down on our project in order to make a concept of a dream, a hope, a change in the way that we were looking at our work. And it yielded fruit. It yielded fruit in probably one of the most challenging dynamic of time for doing a project that I can recall in my career. And then once you implement, the thing that's really important about the implementation phase is you have to follow up. Like any good leader, it's trust but verify, right? So even in the earlier implementation phases, you didn't discuss frequency of use. And what my suggestion is make sure that during the implementation phase, you discuss frequency of use, what project selections make sense, right? Not everything works for a lump sum contract type. That's kind of my message and on my pedestal is to all the software engineers, designers, and people that are trying to help make the industry better. I encourage all of you guys to look at our clients' contract terms that are presented to us. They're GMPs, which is cost plus, that creates an atmosphere where it's a little bit more creative and accepting on trying new things. But then we also have those, smaller lump sum projects. So we have a business model that we want something that works in both theaters, right? Often as a general contractor, that's what I'm looking for. So I encourage everybody to try to get creative on that part so we can work more together. And then Jacob's going to talk about kind of where we think we're headed.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Yeah, so, with what we showed you, right, that's kind of like almost like an infancy phase of like trying to use AR, and really we're using a software that's not necessarily built for physical construction, right? So like, where do we think this thing's going? I think more than anything, we're gonna see, so let me play this for you. So this is from specifically a software company called Twin Build. They're also the creators of Follogram. They're out of Australia, and honestly, they're one of the very few, if not only, out there that I'm aware of. Basically, you've got brick masons that are physically building a parametric, like wavy brick surface, which, to be honest with you, like if you drew that and say it was like layer by layer, the like implementation of that, taking it from drawing to physical building, you might get close, like like it might be like good enough for who it's for kind of thing, but if you want like dead nuts accuracy, this overlay, so basically what this software does is it'll break down each layer of a masonry wall, or anything that you're building, into kind of like a kit of parts, right? So like, and you can identify, hey, I'm installing this specific brick, and it'll show you, like it'll highlight, like, okay, that's in the correct position, you can move on to the next piece.
Yeah, imagine like a 4-foot serpentine pony wall, right? It's just going back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. But rather than have to lay it all out on the ground and follow that serpentine, what it does is it overlaid the model with what he was building. So as he's placing bricks, it was projecting out the telemetry of the serpentine pony wall. So they skip layout. That's
right.
huge. That's huge.
Yeah, the content itself has set out points in it, so like it's got control, but like that's kind of the whole theme of like, one of my biggest takeaways from this conference and like this network, right? It's about the importance of survey control and kind of everything we do. And like, that's just kind of like one piece of that, right? But where I see that kind of technology really coming into like use or like the most need, so if we look at some data on like, how old is the average, skilled tradesperson right now? They're about 50 years old, okay? And they're not being backfilled with the same, like it's not equal numbers, like retirement to new recruits. So in like, say 20 years, when that group retires, what do we do? Like when there's this massive brain drain in the field? I think, tools like that, where it's, you have AR software that is lending expertise to guys who may not have it, right? Because they haven't lived it for years. But if they can see what they're building in front of them in a hologram, it makes perfect sense, right? And we found that with our instance too, where we were taking guys that typically just, build framing, and they were jumping over to support this ceiling group. They'd never built those systems before, but when they can see the complete solution in front of their eyes, they picked it up like, really quick.
I think that's also something that I would recommend is when you're working with your field teams, you're working with your client, your subcontracting partners, and you're walking through the technology, compartmentalize your approach, right? Don't say, I can do this for you. Find out what they're doing on the job. Find out how you can help them. Find out the specific thing that you can make more efficient, or a process that you can make more complete. I think being a little bit more tangible with what the software, what the technology being implemented can do for the project, and knowing a little bit more about what the client's needs are on their specific projects, that's really important to the messaging that when you're talking to those folks, right? So greatly appreciate being invited to this. I was unaware that there was conferences, so really a lot of accolades to Matt and the team putting on the RCN Conference. Look forward to working with a lot of you guys on changing the industry and working together. Appreciate it.
Thank you.